There is a country in the Middle East that faces the world's oil supply. It has functional irrigation dating back 1,500 years before Christ. It has monumental tombs older than the Roman Empire, the Persian Empire, and classical Greece combined. It has a region that turns lush green by monsoon, while the rest of the Arabian Peninsula cracks from the heat. And most people, when they hear the name Oman, think desert, stone, heat, end of story. A country that was producing frankincense when Rome didn't even exist, that expelled the Portuguese from the inside out, not by war, but by calculated betrayal, that has 3,000 active irrigation systems, in a territory that seems impossible to water. If the first image you have of Oman is dry sand, this video will show you what lies beneath. And yes, there is sand, there is heat, there is rock. But Oman is not a country of a single landscape. It is a place where the same territory forces completely different ways of existing. The northern coast controls one of the most critical maritime passages on the planet. The interior survived through engineering. The south receives monsoons, while the rest of the peninsula stays dry. Each strip was molded by a different force and produced a type of power and survival that the others do not have. This is not the Oman of a postcard. This is the Oman the map got wrong. The name you need to know, before anything else, is Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is less than 34 miles wide at its narrowest point, a narrow gap of water between the Arabian Peninsula and Iran. Through this corridor passes today about 20% of all the oil traded on the planet. If you closed Hormuz for a month, global markets would paralyze before the second week. Oman controls the southern half of this strait. The other half belongs to Iran. This position was not conquered. It was inherited by geography, and it was never surrendered. What no one mentions is that this maritime presence does not stop at Hormuz. At one point, Oman had its capital outside its own country. The Sultan moved the seat of government to Zanzibar, an island off the coast of Tanzania, more than 2,000 miles away by sea. It is as if Brazil had its capital in Lisbon, Portugal. The Sultan did not change the capital by conquest. He changed it because that was where the most money came from. Power followed profit, not territory. And this is the pattern that defines Oman throughout its history. An ability to operate beyond its own borders, using routes, not armies. And if the maritime reach is surprising, what the interior hides is even harder to explain. This country has more than 3,000 underground irrigation channels in active operation today. None use pumps, none use motors. They are structures built by gravity, capturing water from springs and water tables, and leading it to oases and settlements, with the precise calculation of the slope. The oldest ones were built over 3,000 years ago, and they are still working. This is why the arid interior was never abandoned. It was occupied, defended, and inhabited for millennia, even where no rain falls. What comes next is not a myth. It exists, and it has 4,000 years of archaeological records to prove it. This territory has had organized civilization for over 4,000 years. When Rome did not yet exist, when the Roman Empire was still 2 millennia away, copper was already leaving from here by sea, bound for the cities of Mesopotamia. Imported pottery from regions that today form Iraq was found in local tombs from the 3rd millennium before Christ. 2 worlds separated by an ocean were already trading through this territory 4,000 years ago. And when the country already seems mapped out, arid, ancient, maritime, the South flips the logic entirely. A strip of this country receives monsoons, while the rest of the Arabian Peninsula cracks from heat. It is the only point in the entire peninsula where this happens, and it is exactly in this strip that the most lucrative trade of the ancient world grew. A resin extracted from here traveled through 65 mandatory stops before reaching the Mediterranean, with a tax charged at every point. It reached Rome with its price multiplied by 10. It was worth more than gold at the peak of demand. The route has existed for 5,000 years. It still works today. A maritime passage the world depends on. 3 millennia of water engineering, civilizational routes that precede Rome, and a global luxury trade that started here before any map existed. This is not a peripheral country. It is a country that the whole world knows by name and has no idea what it is looking at. Now, it is time to enter. The journey begins at the most isolated and politically tense point. It follows through the capital, through the valleys carved by water, through the interior where forts and oases become one, and ends in the south of the frankincense. The order comes from the territory. The deeper you go, the more improbable it will seem that all of this fits within the same country. To be in Musandam, you first have to leave Oman. The peninsula is separated from the rest of the country by 45 miles of United Arab Emirates territory. To go from Muscat to Musandam by land, you cross an international border, enter a different country, and only then re-enter Oman at the northern tip. When you enter the region, the terrain dictates the rules before any signs do. Mountain blocks over 6,000 feet high plunge directly into the sea. The water is dark and deep in the open parts and turns to light green inside the shallow coves. The wind arrives salty and hot. The stone traps the heat. The coastal road bends in sharp turns around the cliffs and disappears behind walls of rock that do not look made for living. Those who look at Musandam see an Arabian fjord. What is here is the Omani edge of the Strait of Hormuz, the passage where 1/5 of the world's oil flows. Every cove has real strategic weight. The Portuguese used the port of Kasab from 1507 to 1650. British forces remained in the region until 1970. The people of this coast are the Shihu, a tribe that built houses into the rock itself, and developed Kumzari, a language that mixes Arabic, Persian, English, Portuguese, and Hindi. Each language is the trace of a trade route that crossed this point of land. "180 miles from Musandam, the country organizes itself as a capital, and the arrival already tells the story of the place. Muscat has been known since the 1st century of the Christian era as a port between east and west. Before any modern building, there was a cove with black volcanic mountains blocking access from the interior, and the open sea in front. The city did not choose this place. The landscape fitted it there. The sea enters dark and calm through the bay. The Al-Jahlali and Al-Mirani forts stand at each end of the cove, with the white facades of the city between them and the dark mountains behind. The air brings salt from the sea, but the heat reflected from the stone does not leave even with a breeze. The temperature of the rock can burn your palm at 2 in the afternoon. What almost no one knows is how Al-Mirani was lost by the Portuguese in 1649. A Hindu merchant who supplied the garrison spent an entire year convincing the Portuguese commander that he was preparing the fort for a wedding. Throughout that year, piece by piece, he emptied the fort of weapons, gunpowder, and supplies. When the fort was completely disarmed, he alerted the Imam Sultan bin Saif. The Portuguese surrendered Al-Mirani. An occupation of nearly 150 years was ended from the inside out, without a frontal battle. The fall of Muscat was a calculated betrayal. The forts remain at both ends of the bay, not as decoration, but as the structure that survived everything that passed through here. "90 miles south of Muscat, the country trades the logic of the cove for the logic of the gorge. A wadi is a valley carved by water in arid rock, Some have water only during rains. Others, like Wadi Shab, on the east coast, have water year-round. To enter, you leave the car, cross by boat, and begin walking along the bottom of the crack. It is not hard, but it is conditional. The place dictates the access, not you. The canyon walls are limestone, 50 to 35 million years old. An ancient seabed pushed upward by tectonics. The cliffs rise hundreds of feet on both sides. The water at the bottom is turquoise and cold, with palm trees clinging to the banks. The sound is not of the sea. It is of water trapped between rock and shadow, echoing. The temperature drops a few degrees. Wadi Shab keeps a secret at the end. After a 40-minute walk, the water enters a cave in the stone. To get there, you must swim about 100 yards through a dark and narrow corridor. On the other side, inside the rock, there is a waterfall plunging from above. Archaeologists found remains of circular fishing huts in this region, dating back 4,000 years. Following the 90 miles to Nizwa is a complete change in logic. The sea disappears. The horizon opens into a dry plateau surrounded by mountains. You enter a city that was the capital and religious center of Oman, closed until the 1950s. So much so that the British explorer Wilfrid Thesiger had to bypass it because his Bedouin guides refused to enter. The circular tower of the Nizwa fort is 110 feet high and 150 feet wide. The largest fort tower in the Arabian Peninsula. It was built in the mid-17th century by Imam Sultan bin Saif, the same man who expelled the Portuguese from Muscat. It took 12 years. It was built over an underground stream, so the defenders would never run out of water during a siege. The entrance was protected by an H-shaped staircase, crooked, narrow, purposely confusing, with 7 heavy doors in sequence. And in the ceiling, there were shafts where defenders poured boiling date syrup over anyone forcing their way through. The fortress was never taken by direct attack. What almost no one knows is that in 1957, the British Royal Air Force bombed this tower. The British Army was called in to suppress a revolt, disputing control of the newly discovered oil reserves in the interior. The top of the tower, which had resisted wars for 300 years, took hits from aircraft bombs. Around the fort is the souk of Nizwa, with silver jewelry, khan jars, the curved daggers that are the national symbol of Oman, and the ceramics of neighboring Bala, and the country's largest irrigation channel, the Falaj Daris, waters 5 miles of palm groves from here. History goes back another 3,000 years. In the area of Bat, you leave behind any landscape of medieval forts and enter open, dry terrain, with mountains on the horizon and stone everywhere. There are no walls. There are no oases. What exists are rows of beehive-shaped tombs lined up on the tops of rocky ridges, small, round, built with dry stacked stones. They are structures from the 3rd millennium before Christ, built when the pyramids of Egypt were being constructed. Each tomb was between 10 and 20 feet wide. Some contained up to 29 bodies. In Ahl Ain, 21 tombs are lined up on a single rocky ridge. What changes everything is what was found inside them. Pottery imported from Mesopotamia was found in these tombs from the 3rd millennium before Christ. Sumerian texts call Oman the land of Magan and describe the region as the main source of copper for Mesopotamia. This means the arid interior of Oman was integrated into the circuit of the greatest civilizations of the ancient world. People died here and were buried with objects that came from a continent away. The stones on the tops of the ridges are not just a cemetery. They are the physical trace of a civilization that the world forgot existed. "600 miles south of Bat. The country changes climate and history. Reaching Dhofar requires the longest journey of the trip. When you enter the region, the country you traveled through so far, arid, rocky, coastal, or dry interior, is no longer there. Between June and September, moisture from the Indian Ocean hits the mountains of Dhofar. This is the Ka Reef, the southwest monsoon wind. Low mist covers the slopes and light rain wets the stone. The hillsides turn green. It is the only place in the Arabian Peninsula where this happens, and it is exactly here that the Boswellia sacra grows, the frankincense tree. At the time of highest demand, between 300 BC and 200 AD, the resin leaving the ports of Dhofar traveled through 65 mandatory stops before reaching the Mediterranean, with a tax charged at every point. Pliny, the Roman writer of the 1st century, documented that frankincense reached Rome with its price multiplied by 10. Wadi Dauka, 25 miles from Sahlahla, is the largest protected forest of Boswellia sacra in the world. Khor-Rori was the port founded in the 1st century to control the resin trade. The ruins stand on a cliff 100 feet high. Al-Balid was one of the largest ports in the Indian Ocean between the 10th and 16th centuries, with archaeological remains spread across 150 acres. Marco Polo visited at the end of the 13th century and wrote about the white incense of excellent quality. The frankincense harvesters in Dhofar still work today as they did 5,000 years ago. On foot, with a small knife, on the same tree their father knew. From the tip of Hormuz to the south of the Frank incense. From the cove forged by the Portuguese to the valley that hides a waterfall inside the stone. From the mud brick wall to the tomb that held Mesopotamian pottery. From the dry stone of the peninsula to the monsoon green of Dhofar. In no moment did we leave the same country. Oman is not what the map suggests. It is a territory that changes from within and only lets itself be understood. When you cross all the layers in the order the landscape dictates, 7 places, a coastline to the interior, and still, only the surface.